The Newsround on Off the Ball.
With Gillette. Put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
This is News Talk.
Well, Euro 2020, I got to say, to the very end, you have been bloody brilliant. What a tournament. And what a day of drama yesterday. English heartbreak, penalties, cruel mistress once again. Italy European champions for the first time since 1968. We will chat to Pat Nevin, Kevin Kilban and Simon Cooper as well across the evening. Simon Cooper on the madness at Wembley in particular. He was there watching the scenes unfold pre-game and beyond. Monday Night Rugby then, Jerry Thornley and South African journalist Craig Ray with us. The South African A squad for Wednesday has 18 World Cup winners, so it seems at very last on this tour, at long last, we will have a proper contest. The boys on the way after 8 o'clock, followed by Breed Stack with us until just after 8:30 rather, talking about the weekend's GAA. So until Donegal Derry yesterday, it was not the best weekend. The lowest winning margin was 8 points. The largest was 24 points. So it was good we got the game in Ballybuffet. Breed Stack will chat to us about the weekend. 53106, the text number. We are at Off the Ball. Richie McCormack on the Newsround. Hello.
Hey, Joe.
Adrian Barry, hello to you.
Hi, Joe. Richie.
Well, where do we start yesterday, Adrian?
Where do you start? That's right. Jeez, there's so much to pick through. So much to unpack, Joe, as the kids say these days. I don't know. I was really disappointed. I've spoken a fair bit about wanting England to win it, and I wasn't sure that was actually true. Obviously, you don't know until they get to the final, and then it goes to extra time, it goes to penalties. I was kind of saying the same stuff in 2018, and then when it came down to it, I kind of felt maybe this is this is time enough for them now around the semi-finals. But no, even in the penalty shootout last night, I was really hoping, and I was devastated for the players, particularly Marcus Rashford, for it to have been him, particularly after the year that he's had, mainly off the pitch. But yeah, I was really disappointed for them, to be honest.
Rich, where were you in that spectrum?
Very happy that Italy won, mostly because I cheered as loud last night as I did in 06, put it that way. Italy have always been my second team pretty much since the early 90s, since I was that kid watching highlights on a Monday night in RTE before Channel 4 even got a hold of it. But yeah, the scenes before and during game yesterday certainly didn't help as regards to the wish to see England succeed, because what we saw in the build-up to last night's game, and indeed during it with the ticketless people that you could so visibly see in the aisles at Wembley, it showed the people that, as humble and as down-to-earth and as nice as this team may be, the people that they represent, or at least a chunk of them certainly, very much aren't of that disposition. And I thought the scenes last night at Wembley were terrible. There are journalists up and down the land across there who were there, who can outline scenes of what they saw. I mean, there were family members of team members of both sides. I mean, Roberto Mancini's son saying today that there were fans invading his space. There were fans invading the personal space and the seats of family members of the England team. There were people in front of the press box as well that had no right to be there. The scenes out in front of Wembley Way and in Leicester Square yesterday were just grim on a number of different levels, and doesn't augur well for a World Cup bid as hopeful as the Taoiseach is today about that 2030 World Cup bid between the Ireland and the FA and the Scottish FA and the Welsh FA. I mean, it doesn't look well if they can't organise a final, and the policing and the security systems in place are fail that badly for something so big.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing from Simon Cooper on that front, because this is not a country unaccustomed to hosting capacity crowds at stadiums up and down the country. It's just amazing that this happened. I mean, we've been to our fair share of matches all around Europe and beyond, and generally there is a ring of steel around stadiums. They're not easy places to infiltrate like this. So it was just amazing that it was so susceptible. And it was pretty obvious from early on in London that there was a raucous crowd and a big crowd, and maybe, a few extra people on security mightn't be the worst idea. Really was extraordinary. I was supporting England, or found myself, well, supporting is a strong word, but found myself very much liking a lot of what England were about for much of the tournament. And then it got to the final and I kind of thought, whatever changed in me, I thought, now I want Italy to win. And so when
has his limits, Joe.
They scored, I'm only human, Richie. When they scored the equaliser, huge cheer. I mean, brilliant, great. And then it was very hard to cheer the Saka miss. As a moment, if you were up for Italy as a more neutral to casual supporter of Italy, it was a touch flat, because you just knew this 19-year-old is basically going to be reminded about this every day for the rest of his life. And fair play to him for standing up to take the penalty. So it was kind of a, kind of a moment, and then you're happy enough for Italy when they win. So Jack Grealish has come out to defend himself, because Roy Keane on ITV, Adrian, was saying, Sterling, Grealish, what are they doing letting a 19-year-old take that penalty? So Grealish has come out to say, and you could see this in the TV pictures if you were watching, you could see Grealish being asked, and he nodded to Southgate and said, yeah. So Grealish has come out to say, I won't have people saying I didn't want to take one, I would have taken one. He said the gaffer has made lots of good decisions or right decisions in the tournament, and did last night as well, but I won't have people saying I wasn't taking one. So Grealish would have taken one. I don't know about Sterling. Sterling doesn't strike me as the most natural striker of ball. I feel a touch nervous about him taking a penalty. I know he's scored them in the past, but for 19-year-old Saka to miss it, it would have been just a much nicer conclusion for Jorginho to score his.
Yeah, you never want it to be that way, obviously, and particularly for a player so young. And look, there's so much invested today and last night in results bias, and some of the penalties, like Rashford. Should they put Rashford and Sancho on, and had they enough time to warm up? And it's a valid enough conversation to have, obviously. Yeah. But there's so much discussion about Rashford's technique, that sort of front on arc run. But for all of that, 2 inches to the right, it's back of the net, and nobody's having the conversation today about Southgate making mistakes. And it is a game of incredibly fine margins. So look, I don't know. And it's right to have the conversation about it, obviously.
I checked Rashford's record, so he has scored 15 of 17 penalties. Sancho's is 10 of 11. So the logic to bring them on was sound, and I suspect they've done this in a pretty serious way at training, and that's why Saka emerged as a potential penalty taker. You don't just say to the 19-year-old, do you fancy one? So he's obviously proven himself in training, and same applies for Rashford and Sancho. But it definitely is legitimate query to ask why you gave them all of 30, 40 seconds, to get a feel for the game, to get a feel for the ball. Imagine having to take a penalty like that cold. It must just have been horrific.
Not by much, but he did want to give them a little bit longer. Their introduction was delayed by the fact that the ball was kept in play, and the referee and the assistants actually didn't allow the substitutions. But that's my point. Whether or not they score penalties is I don't think is the real issue for England today. I think what the real issue is how they completely slunk back into themselves until the introduction pretty much of Saka late on in that game, because they started so brilliantly and so brightly, and we saw that goal from Luke Shaw, and could have been also badly wrong when we saw literally 30 seconds before was Harry Maguire putting the ball out of play really nervously for a corner from which England broke, and then obviously scored that goal. But after that, I'm not going to say they showed a lack of ambition, because for another 20 minutes they did really boss possession and look like they were going to be the team to run away with this final. But they allowed Italy back into that game, and that's what I think hurt Southgate more than the penalties, is that they let Italy back into a position from which England were dominating, and they let Italy back into the game. They completely bossed that game onwards from about 40 minutes onwards up until the introduction of Saka. That was Italy's game to lose. They completely had their heads up.
The worst thing about the Italian goal from an English perspective is it was coming for so long, and at a certain point I do have huge sympathy for Southgate or any manager in that situation, because it's so easy to say. I was definitely thinking it was time to make a change for sure. Now I wasn't entirely sure what that change should be or how it would turn the game. Even Saka's introduction, it's not like England suddenly dominated. They were a bit better, but I think in part Italy had scored their equaliser, so maybe they were not pushing as hard. But for sure, the original sin here is not the penalties, it is the way they approached the game after they scored. And they've been pragmatic all tournament. When they scored against Ukraine, they sat back for the rest of that half, and you get away with it against Ukraine. But last night, when you hand Italy the initiative and hand them possession and hand them momentum, it's a really dicey game to play. But you could still imagine Southgate's thinking, Adrian, at 45, 50 minutes, 60 minutes, okay, we're under the cosh here. It's not like they're tearing us open either. They've had one or two moments, but we're getting close to finishing line territory here. We just sit a bit longer. You can just imagine the dilemma. It's not a brave way to approach it, but I can see how he fell into that trap.
Yeah, even with the substitutes later on, that holding off was sort of for fear of getting them on, and then obviously conceding, and that's the biggest sign of his conservatism, I suppose. Even to the point there that you thought Italy, can't remember which player it was, but they went for bit of a ridiculous cross into the box that I think might have gone out over the end line. He actually thought if they hang on to the ball for another minute, they won't be able to make the subs, and that in itself would have been a mad one.
Yeah.
But like, we chatted to Martin Lipton on OTB AM on Friday about that idea that England could play it whichever way you want, and the perception of that being there, right? Like that if things were going against them in a game, they could get Grealish on, or they could get Foden on, or they could mix it up, or they could change systems. But I think that the warning signs were there from the Denmark match. Like you mentioned Ukraine as well, but like that was the most recent and damning sort of indictment of the English system, in that like when Denmark came back in, when it went 1-1, and like England's capacity for a long period of the game to be able to grind out another goal, they did create chances, but the incisiveness to actually score a goal wasn't there. They had to rely on a dodgy penalty. That really challenged for me the idea that they could play it whatever way you wanted. And like even though it was a different dynamic last night, like they went 1-up, they should have taken the game by the neck at that point. Like it was inconceivable at that point the way they were playing, how dominant they were. Like Italy just did not look like Italy.
They were shell shocked
first half at all. They were shell shocked, and they were so lacking in confidence. Joe, I was watching them, like any of their players on the wing, and maybe Emerson chief amongst them. Their lack of appetite to take on Shaw or Walker, for example, to get right down to the touchline and try and whip it back. Whenever that became any kind of a likelihood, they just balked at the opportunity and went back again. But like, yeah, I don't know. They just
I think they figured with Walker, Stones, and Maguire in there, just crossing the ball was a waste of time. But there were times where you were saying to them, you're going to have to do something here, because they were going nowhere. And I think that's what that maybe gave that in the first half, that period where they were just failing to cut England open at all. Like there was the Chiesa left-footed shot which went just wide, but I'd say that gave Southgate a degree of comfort that okay, even though we've handed them the ball, they're not cutting us open, and suddenly like the finishing line is within touching distance, and you think they'll figure it out, my boys will figure it out, we'll get through this, and they'll weather the storm. And it didn't happen. What was so striking, Rich, and we'll get into the newsround now and I'll get to some texts, but was so striking about the goal, the English goal, is so the ball's on the left hand side and there's a little bit of play, and it breaks inside into midfield, and suddenly England have a bit of space to move into. So Kyle Walker bombs on. This is why it's so hard to understand what was the English mentality or what was the plan, because for the first goal, Kyle Walker bombs on and Trippier pushes forward with the ball, and so Walker, one of the centre halves then goes outside of Trippier on the overlap, which takes away the Italian left back, must have been Emerson, and so Trippier has all the time in the world to put in this pinpoint cross to the other wing back, and then Luke Shaw, what a finish, by the way. The technique was just out of this world. Yeah. But you think in the first 5 minutes the attitude is generally keep it tight, don't do anything silly, and yet England here in the first 5 minutes have Luke Shaw on the end of a Trippier cross with one of the centre backs initially underlapping and then overlapping Trippier, and so you're thinking, oh God, if they play like this, they will cut any team to ribbons. And then I don't know, they score, and just I think it was just the finishing line is there. Just score too early is a stupid thing to say, but just having something for them to hold on to in a game of that magnitude, it just seemed to debilitate the whole team.
I think the fact that they got to half-time at 1-0 up and then went into the second half thinking that they had what they hold, because in that first half period, it's easy to forget that. I thought Harry Kane was playing brilliantly. He was dropping deep. He was dragging the Italian defence to positions they didn't want to be in, and making the midfield ask questions of themselves that they didn't want to be asked. And Jorginho looked like he was fallible, particularly when he picked up an injury. And Kane looked like he was going to run that show and let Sterling in behind, or let the others wide players in behind to try and nab a goal. But the second goal didn't come, and I think as soon as they hit half time, they calcified to a degree, because we met, like Adrian's mentioned there, that it showed that they can't play either way. I think they can. I think there was a question of whether they wanted to or not last night, because the longer that game went on, it was more of a case that they couldn't sacrifice their two holding midfielders, and they couldn't drop that down to one to put on a more incisive player, or at least, Southgate looked like he felt he couldn't do that. And they needed to just have the bodies in midfield to counteract whatever was going to be thrown at them by Jorginho and his pals in the centre of the park. Now, it worked to a degree, because obviously they got to 120 minutes still level. But you just wanted, if you're an England supporter, and I think, again, that's the regret they'll have today, not whether or not the ball from the penalty spot went an inch or two either side of the post. It's that they had the game there to be won, and that they did have the means to go there and do it. And for whatever reason, did not do it.
Yeah, and he does have so many options. Like, even if he wants to be conservative, Henderson coming onto that pitch a bit earlier, even if it's for Mount, is conservative-ish. But Henderson, if you had told him on the sideline, we need to start keeping the ball again, that is your primary job out there, communicate that to everyone and lead it. That would have been something. Like, I wanted Grealish on for Mount, and I wanted him on earlier. The Saka move was fine, I guess. You wouldn't say he had an extraordinary game, he did okay. But to do nothing, again, it's hindsight argument now, but to do nothing until the Italians equalised is probably the biggest issue for Southgate and how people will judge him now over the coming days. Like, the penalties are the penalties. The Sancho Rashford substitution is definitely strange. Like, there's no two ways about it. It's not ideal. But Jorginho played the whole game and he missed his penalty, and these things can happen. You know, I hate the phrase penalties are a lottery, but there's something in that. You can only science your way so far. But to just sit in his hands now is a decision which has aged so badly. We should start the news round, so it is as ever. With thanks to Gillette, put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. I mean, God. Like night follows day, it was inevitable that we'd be talking about racist abuse today of those 3 penalty takers, and so it proved.
Yeah, Gareth Southgate indeed condemning the racist abuse suffered by some of his players following last night's defeat to Italy. Marcus Rashford, Jadon Sancho and Bukayo Saka all missed in the shootout, and all 3 were subjected to online racist abuse. Meanwhile, a mural in Manchester has also been defaced, which depicted Marcus Rashford, and Southgate hopes the abuse will be adequately dealt with.
For some of them to be abused is unforgivable, really. I know a lot of that has come from abroad. You know, the people that track those things have been able to explain that, but not all of it, and it's just not what we stand for. We I think have been a beacon of light in bringing people together, in people being able to relate to the national team, and the national team stands for everybody, and so that togetherness has to continue, and we've shown the power our country has when it does come together and has that energy and positivity together. We felt that from the fans, and I'm incredibly proud of the players. And as I said yesterday, the game we needed to win in the 120 minutes. We were a little bit short in that period. Then it's my decision who takes the penalties. It's not a case of players not volunteering or, you know, more experienced players backing out. They didn't have the chance. That was my choice, nobody else's.
So some texts in. This England post-mortem is going to be as entertaining as the Euros were themselves. Great to hear the car horns beeping around Dublin last night. Sounded like there were a lot of happy Italians around, says Bill. Sorry for the England players, says Patrick, but absolutely not sorry for the England fans who just can't help themselves. They tell us it's a small minority, but that small minority has managed to show up at every big game for the last 40 years. Nolan Cork, did Timofte not teach us that stuttered run-up is grand if it works, but you'll forever be blamed for not sprinting up and blasting the ball if you miss? Maguire's penalty is sight to behold. It was an outrageous penalty. Actually, Eamon in Kildare makes that point. Lads, surely the best penalty last night, ironically enough, was Harry Maguire, unsavable. Yeah. I know, and I think we all at that moment when he walked up saying, uh-oh, this is going over the bar. Harry Maguire, apology in the post. It was incredible. I hate the stuttered run-up though. I do think it's the kind of thing that works really, really well when you're relaxed. I can imagine Rashford in training, they're having a laugh. These penalties are just beautiful, and keepers going the wrong way all over the place. But akin to, you know, so many sports, like a golf swing that requires timing or a stuttered run up like that, the more moving parts you have, when you're under pressure, you're giving yourself more room for error. And it's not like Rashford missed by miles or it was a complete systems failure. But I just think, Adrian, when pressure comes on, to have that kind of a run up, that number of moving parts, again, is just opening yourself up to something going wrong.
Concur with that entirely, Joe. I have to say, I think that there are so few players that, like, when it comes off, it looks great. There are so few players, even at that elite level, there's just so much going on. Surely at that stage of the game, you want to be simplifying your technique as much as you possibly can. Yeah. Like, at that stage, you're looking at what's my, my starting position, what's my style of run up to the ball. Am I going to do a couple of jinks? Am I going to do a stutter start when I get there? Am I watching where the keeper is going? That seems to me to be an awful lot of thoughts to be having to deal with at a moment where, like, I'm not saying run up and bull toe it into the back of the net. at all. But I just think that and like it's one of those things as well. You know yourself in football where like it can be on trend, right? Like that Jorginho, I saw on like TikTok, all these platforms afterwards. There's a million people trying the Jorginho penalty, right? Like and that catches hold. Like professional footballers are looking at it going, we must develop our technique here. So I think they'd be better advised, a lot of them, like even at that level, to just simplify the hell out of it. And you know,
one thing that I think will die a death after last night, because both our teams and both players actually indulged in this, wasn't necessarily the stuttered run up. Both Rashford and Jorginho, after the whistle was blown, waited an inordinate amount of time to actually take their penalty. Like if you were waiting in tennis, there would have been a shot clock on this to see when they were going to actually launch their serve, because they waited an insane amount of time and both of them crucially missed. So I think if anything is going to go by the wayside, it isn't necessarily the stuttered run up, although nobody was as bad as Simone Zaza last night. But I think that long wait from whistle to kick was probably killed last night by Rashford and Jorginho.
By the way, just a point on the Sancho Rashford substitutions being so late, so both on literally 120 minutes. Again, Southgate did try and explain this earlier on in his press conference. He was making the point, once I brought on Rashford and Sancho, I was left with 4 defensive players. I was left with Stones, Maguire, Phillips and Shaw, and that was it. Like, we did have Marcus Rashford at right back, and there's only so long you want to have Marcus Rashford at right back. So again, I think, as you said, Richie, he was trying to get them on maybe even just that 2, 3, 4 minutes earlier, and maybe should have made sure to do that, or got one of the players to foul the Italians as they were keeping possession for a minute and a half. But there was a logic in like not having Rashford at right back. Like there was a point where Rashford was walking up the ball went out for a throw in, and Stones had to call him back and say, you could see Stones like slightly confused saying, are you right back? You could lip read him saying, are you right back? And Rashford obviously had a picture and said yeah, and then Stones was like pointing saying, you take the throw in, like the right back takes the throw in, I'm not taking the throw in. So you get Southgate's thinking there as well.
Well, imagine how hammered he'd get, Joe, if the criticism that's there at the minute, that is like a nuanced enough point about whether he should be a bit more adventurous or not. If he plays that for 4 or 5 minutes and Italy score, he's getting absolutely
100%.
hammered. He could end up losing his job.
Yeah, 100%. That's exactly what the point I was trying to make. You've done it more succinctly for me there. So this Lions tour, Richie, it continues to twist and turn.
Yeah, Leinster hooker Ronan Kelleher could be set for a late call-up to the Lions squad. Head coach Warren Gatland says they are looking at cover in their front row positions. Kelleher scored not only 4 tries for Ireland on Saturday in a comfortable win over the United States. Meanwhile, Gatland claims it's possible Alan Wynne-Jones could rejoin the squad, having recovered from a dislocated shoulder.
Oh, obviously, look, a few weeks ago we didn't think there was an option, and he's been back fully training with Wales. He's training this week with them. I think he's doing a double session tomorrow with them, and we'll just see what the outcome of that is. So he has made a remarkable recovery in terms of that injury, which the assessment was initially that it wasn't as bad as they first thought. So that's a real positive, and it would be a boost to the squad to having someone of his experience and caliber to come back into the squad.
Yeah, absolutely extraordinary if he somehow comes back from that 3 weeks on. Meanwhile, this game on Wednesday, Richie, is going to break with the tradition of this tour thus far and actually be interesting.
It's going to be pretty tasty, this one. Conor Murray is going to captain the Lions for the first time against South Africa A on Wednesday. Ireland teammates Bundy Aki and Ian Anderson are also included in the starting 15, while Tyke Byrne is named among the replacements. Murray, who came off the bench last Saturday, will partner Dan Biggar at half-back, while the South Africa A team contains 7 players that started in their 2019 World Cup final win. 5 of those are in the back line, with fullback Willie LaRue and Cheslin Colby getting a start in the game in Cape Town. There's also the centre partnership of Damien Delende and Skepper Lucano Am, as well as scrum half Faf de Klerk. Second row, Eben Etzebeth and flanker Peter Steph Dutois will also start in Cape Town. Yeah,
we have that game live on Wednesday, so we're looking forward to it. Craig, how bitter a person am I? I found out last night I couldn't bring myself to have any sympathy for Declan Rice at full time. Well, come on, I mean, look, Saint wouldn't have sympathy for Declan Rice. We're not talking Declan Rice here. Don't beat yourself up, Craig. Paul and Cork, the OH Champions League final, United and Chelsea both made subs at the end of extra time. Both Anderson and Belletti scored their kicks. It can work. Totally. Yeah, I agree. I think the logic was okay, He adds, P.S. we were fortunate not to host that England-Germany game at the Aviva. ? Yeah, maybe in hindsight, who knows?
And we absolutely were.
Somebody else. When did flares in butt cheeks become a thing? Well, that is the pertinent question, I think, of Euro 2020. That was the first, I mean, we all got the videos in different orders, I suppose. That was the first sign for me that things were taking a turn in London. The
When did you know?
Flair in the butt cheek moment.
Oh my God, it was horrific. You mentioned Ring of Steel earlier on, Joe, which is an appropriate terminology.
Jesus Christ.
Whoa! Family show.
Oh my God.
Wow. It didn't feel separated from the comments that have just been made. The breaches of security around Wembley and in that sort of fire exit door, whatever it was that the fans ended up breaking on through, felt like it was not at all a Ring of Steel.
No,
like
I couldn't believe it. Yeah,
pulled down with the like flimsy Euro 2020 material on them. That's not like, it really is proven that. You mentioned it earlier on, but just in terms of future staging for England or anywhere else, again, that can be on trend, and you can see it cropping up again at other tournaments down the track. But like, it just felt really easy for fans to get past it.
I couldn't believe it. Yeah, and in that video, I think we've all seen that video of the bunch getting in the door and pushing the stewards aside, and then fights breaking out. And initially, it was hard to work out if there were people rushing over to help their mates in, or if they were acting as vigilantes. Well, vigilantes is even a kind way of putting it. I think just some opportune punching and kicking of people on the ground. But like, that video has done the rounds, and that one was out of control.
Somebody, I think it was Dan McDonald, said last night on Twitter, UEFA will obviously be concerned by the scenes they saw last night, but they'll be more enamoured with the fact that Wembley and the FA managed to sell out 60,000 tickets at 400 quid a pop, which is UEFA and FIFA's only real concern when these tournaments do come around.
Fellas, we are out of time. We haven't even scratched the surface. We'll have Kevin Kilban later on, Simon Cooper as well, who was at the game, Pat Nevin shortly. Thanks very much, Richie. Cheers. Adrian, thanks a mil.
Thanks, lads.
We have a competition for you as well.
The 20k giveaway on News Talk.
So we're giving you the chance to win a life-changing sum of money. €20,000 could be yours this Friday. All you have to do to be in with a chance of winning is answer this question. Where are the 2020 Olympic Games being held? A, Tokyo, or B, Hong Kong? If you want to enter, text the word play followed by A or B, your answer A or B, A Tokyo or B Hong Kong, to 57599. 57599. Entries cost €2.50. You must be over 18 to enter, or 18 years of age. We are running this right across the Go Loud network, and you'll find full terms and conditions on newstalk.com. Get your entry in by 3 o'clock this Friday, and we could be calling you to give you 20k this Friday. So best of luck with that. We're talking to Pat Nevin next.
The News Round on Off the Ball.
With Gillette. Put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.